Tell us a little bit about what it actually means to be a councillor.
It means working very hard and achieving an awful lot, but a lot of it's under the radar, and I like that. There's a subtlety to it which appeals to me. People get in contact with problems that they find intractable, and it's an opportunity. You're in a very privileged role to be able to link people together, to act as a middleman, to put somebody who thinks their problems are insurmountable to them in touch with somebody who might be able to help them and mediate between them to see that we can actually achieve things and make people's lives happier. And that might be anything from fly tipping incidents to I've dealt with some very delicate situations with young children and their disabilities and schooling and so forth. And you know, I do other things, like I put out daily weather reports when the roads are bad, with specific information about specific roads to my ward. So it's been a great experience. I've really enjoyed it, and I think I've managed to achieve a fair amount and helped a lot of people throughout the 4 years that I've been doing it.
Just briefly, can you sum up what a councillor is responsible for?
Well, that seems to be just about everything. It feels like just about everything. At the high level, there are 64 councillors in South Lanarkshire Council, 3 or 4 to each ward. My ward is Clydesdale East, which is sort of bigger down to the Dar Valley. It's an absolutely huge area. It's almost as far across as Lanark, but Carstairs Junction are included. And we administer a budget of about £700 million or so, which pays for everything from education to care of the elderly, to fixing the roads, emptying your bins, a broad range of things. But we also act as the representatives of our local people to the council. So people can come through me because they've got trouble with their bins not being emptied, or they've got trouble with vandalism, or they've got trouble with road incidents, or roads not being repaired, or things like that. They can come through me, and I can act on their behalf to speak to the council. Because whilst they can sometimes get stuck in helplines, and the council is very good. I don't mean to criticise the council, but sometimes people can get stuck in helplines and things and just not know where to go. I have the ability to phone the executive directors or some of the senior staff direct and say, right, who's the best person to speak to? How can we get this sorted? And it's, as I say, it's very fulfilling. It's very, it's hard work, because you get an awful lot of inquiries, and the more you do and the better you do, the more people ask you to do, and that's great. I certainly don't complain about it, but it's a good workload.
Do you know how the public perceives you as a councillor?
It's a very good question. Some people think I'm their servant and I should jump every time they whistle, and others are very shy of coming towards me, think I'm maybe somebody very important, but I'm not. I'm just an ordinary person. 4 years ago, I was just any other citizen, and just because I was elected, I'm elected as the representative of the people of Clydesdale East. I am one of them. I'm no different to any of them. I'm no better. I'm no worse. But I do have access by because I'm elected, I do have that access to people at the council and wider. I've been able to talk to the police to help with road traffic. We had a huge problem at Tinto with road traffic and accidents, and including a very sad fatality. And I was able to get the police and the local community council literally around a table. Those were the days before COVID. Get them literally around the table and talk through the problems, and that led to actually a real solution to the problem rather than the continued ache of road accident after road accident.
Is it a fairly frustrating process having to deal with what you might call bureaucracy, or do things work reasonably smoothly in Clydesdale?
It can be frustrating, but actually, I mean, Sutherland's Council is a good council. Sometimes you do feel, well, one of the biggest is there is always a constraint on funds. So you may see something that should be done, needs to be done, but there just isn't the money to do it. And that can be very, very frustrating. But what I do find is that most of the officers in the council are very good at trying to find ways to do things. Plus, of course, we have the added advantages here of having the wind farm benefit funds, which can be very helpful in helping the community where the council is constrained.
Tell us a little bit about your own background, what you've done in your life, and maybe in a few minutes we'll talk about the fact that you have a disability and how that's affected you as well.
Right. Well, I'm 54 years old. I was born in Edinburgh. I lived in Fife for the first part of my life, and then when I was 10, we moved to Kent in England. I didn't come back till I was 18. But after that, I worked in a bank for a little while, and then I was an independent financial advisor for over 30 years. I'm married. I have 2 children. We lived near Biggar for about 26 years now. Since my children were very small. It's a beautiful place to live. We have lovely views from here. And well, I became a councillor 4 years ago.
What about work-wise? Because you have a disability, has that made it more difficult to either hold down a job or to do the job that you do?
Well, that's interesting actually, because I was a financial advisor for a whole 30 odd years, but 2004, I had an operation on my neck, and I woke up from that paralyzed from the neck down, and I spent 3 months completely paralyzed. Then the rest of that year in hospital and rehab, learning to move about a bit. You know, I've got one arm that works, one that sort of doesn't, and I can, you know, I'm use a wheelchair. So I went back to work after that, went back to my original employer. Really didn't work out well, and we ended up in a tribunal. But after that, I realized that going back to work was going to be difficult, because keeping the regular hours that are expected of an office worker were difficult for me. And I got the feeling that people just wanted to exploit me for my contacts rather than you know, give me a proper job. So I decided to set up my own business. Now, that's a daunting enough task, I think, if you're able-bodied. It was very daunting as a person with a pretty severe disability. But my clients were very understanding, very supportive, and we made it work. And I ran that for 15 years. And I only stopped that business because that, on top of being a councillor and wanting to stand for Holyrood, meant there was just too much of a workload, and it made sense to dispose of it and go all in to politics. And that's what I've done. But it was a good lesson to learn. I enjoyed it. I mean, running a business is a challenge, but it's a rewarding challenge, and not just financially, but you know, there are challenges every day in making things work and turning the thing round and making it run smoothly for an extended period of time.
How did you, I assume there'd be quite a big mental adjustment to make when you became disabled. A lot of times people use the word physically challenged. How did you make that mental adjustment?
It's a very good question. I cried a lot, but you know, in the end, I don't think anybody should feel sorry for me, because it changed my perspective on life. You have to look at everything, from being a father to running a business to just the general day-to-day, how you're going to live your life. And I made some very radical changes in my life, not least setting up a business, finally going into politics, which are things I don't think I would have ever done. But you know, you have to just remain strong and keep looking forward and trying to concentrate on the positives and try to overlook some of the difficulties and the negatives. But I have to say, right from the outset, the one great strength that I had was my wife, because you know, when I was literally struck down and couldn't move from the neck down, she was there for me very, very strongly. She was very capable in dealing with both uh, the hospital and the medical side of things, and also taking on and bringing up the children and looking after the house while I was literally not there for 12 months. And even then, when I came back, I certainly wasn't pulling my weight as I might have done prior to it. So I have to give her incredible thanks for all the time. And incidentally, we've been married for 33 years this year, and that will be 16 years as I was an able-bodied husband and 17 years as a disabled husband. So she's maybe getting used to me now, but
She must like you.
she must. But I love her deeply. So there we are.
Yeah, that. Can you tell us something about yourself that might surprise us? Something unusual?
Up until about this time last year, I still rode a motorbike. I've been a motorcyclist pretty much all my life, and I had to give it up because I was disabled. But after a few years, I kind of had a notion to try and do something, and I bought a quad bike, and I rode that for a couple of years, 3 years, and then I bought a trike. Now I can't. I'm never going to be back on a proper motorcycle with only one hand. That's actually the most difficult. Well, yeah, it's probably the most difficult part of it. With one hand and really no feet working properly either. You have to do all the controls with one hand. So it had to be an automatic. And so I bought this trike. I got a grant from the National Association for Bikers with a Disability, and converted it so that I could use it with one hand. And I rode round the Isle of Man TT circuit on it, whilst listening to George Osborne's Budget. But but I finally gave that up last year because it really has become too much for me. Unfortunately, I did have to give that up. There you are.
That's pretty good. And finally, is there certain pluses? It's kind of it's not a disingenuous question, but it's a slightly unusual question. Are there certain pluses or things that you've gained from the fact that you are disabled now that kind of help you develop qualities or other attributes as a result?
Oh, very much so. When how to put this really? I had to change my view of life. I had to think of what are the things that I could do, and you have to think, what can you do that involves only from here up, you know, only from the neck up. What are the things you can do? And I had to sort of think, well, I gave up cycling. I was a mad cyclist. I gave that up, but I had to think of other ways to exercise myself and my mind, and I would never have got into politics. It just wouldn't have happened. There's no way I would. But the other thing is, when I got into politics, I decided that I wasn't going to be the token disabled person going around. I thought that's no good. But then I realised that nobody else was looking after a lot of the disabled issues, or they play sort of token to them without really understanding what the real issues are. I live those issues, so I have a good deal of understanding. I have a particular, so I've got involved in an awful lot of disabled sort of boards and charities and all various things across the way. But I mean, one of the things, I want to get rid of the disabled badge, the picture of a man in a wheelchair, because I think it's so limiting in what it says about disabled people. The council has to build council houses. 8% of them have to have to be disabled accessible. And the definition for that is a man in a wheelchair who has good upper body strength, who's 6 foot tall. Now that just doesn't define disabled people in any shape or form. It doesn't even define me, and I am just over 6 foot tall, and I am a man, but I have no upper body strength. One arm doesn't work. So, but where does that go when you're talking about people who are deaf or blind, or people who have autism, or any number of other attributes which make up 1 in 5 of the population? So I'd like to see that as a symbol go, and we have a much broader definition of disability that will encompass a lot more people. And that is a positive view that I don't think I would have necessarily had if I was still walking about as an ordinary person.